Gillen, and we will be discussing the pros and cons of using social media during work hours. I'm Con. And so first I'm going to start off with saying that according to Forbes.com and Kelly Services, 51% of Americans believe that using social media during work hours lowers productivity. And that's kind of the biggest, issue that people run into, is that time is money. And if you have every single employee being on social media 2 to 3 hours during work hours, I mean, just take that and multiply it by how much money you're paying each employee, and just think about all the money that you're losing because they're on social media when they should be doing work. And Under 30 CEO shows that employees who were born between 1980 to 1985 are more likely to be less productive and waste more time using sites like Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Pinterest, or even shopping online versus those employees who were born between 1960 and 1969. So there seems to be that issue, the underlying issue of the younger generation, the millennials, I think they're called, that they just want to be on the internet constantly, and they always have to be tapped in. They don't understand what it's like to go without the internet or cell phones or tablets. And another issue that employers are running into is just because employees may not be using a work computer doesn't mean they're not on social media. Now you've got smartphones with the Facebook apps and LinkedIn and Pinterest. I mean, I have all of those on my smartphone. Or what about tablets? So they could still be wasting time. And that creates another problem, because if they're using their own personal devices to waste time, there's no way for employees to keep track and monitor how much time these employees are wasting during work hours. And according to Salary.com, a survey that they conducted shows that 64% of employees visit non-work-related sites. That included Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Pinterest, Instagram, Amazon.com, and some other sites for shopping as well. They also concluded that 41% of users use Facebook to socialize, while 37% use LinkedIn, and 25% of employees do online shopping. Now, that's a lot of wasted time. They also stated in their survey that 46% of employees use LinkedIn and Facebook's Glassdoor to apply to new jobs while they're at their current job. So, and I actually have, I have a coworker that I have seen at my job during work hours apply to new jobs on the work computer. And personally, from my point of view, I think that's really unprofessional. She says she does it because she doesn't have a computer at home. Well, there's something that people invented that's called a library, and now they offer free computers and free Wi-Fi. So I think if you're unhappy in your current job, don't use what you should be using to do work to apply to new jobs. It just, in my opinion, looks very bad. I've also seen her do online shopping as well. Again, the same reason, she doesn't have a computer at home. I've seen her buy shoes. I've seen her buy food online. I've seen her buy clothes. I see her on Facebook about maybe a total of 3 hours out of her 9-hour work shift. And I just think that it does. It really lowers productivity because you're so focused on how everybody else is doing and what they're so involved with in their lives that what's important to you sort of falls to the wayside. Mm-hmm. And that's why I try not to use it at work. I mean, if I get a phone call on my cell phone, I try to step away. I try to keep it very short. On my break, sometimes I'll do homework, but that's my 30 minutes. That's my dinner. And whatever I don't get accomplished in that 30 minutes, whether it be Facebooking, Twitter, personal shopping, homework, that is just you know, I'm out of luck because I really want to do well at my job. And I try to minimize the social media usage because I don't want to be stereotyped. And I think that people my age, that's another issue. They, again, want to be so tapped in. They have to have everything at their fingertips that they make a bad impression, and employers don't want to hire you. And that was an issue I ran into after graduating, is that 20-year-olds don't know what they're doing. They don't know how to be professional because they're going to be on social media sites. They're going to be texting. They're going to be taking personal phone calls. They don't have developed communicational skills. And I think that all that leads back to social media, especially during work hours. And I just think that social media is not appropriate if it's not in your job field. You shouldn't be on it at work. And even in my job field, I try to restrain my personal usage. If I'm using social media to get a breaking news story out, hey, great, I'm promoting the newspaper. But that's a difference. It's not personal. It's for the company. And that's another thing that a lot of people can't distinguish between is, oh, just because you're a social media manager doesn't mean that you should also be using your personal social media. You need to be branding your company and only your company during those work hours.
Okay.
And I think that is what's so important.
I think you make a lot of great points, and some of the points that you make, I'm going to try to counter, and maybe there's a compromise in between. I think I'm going to take the position that social media, the use of social media by employees should be allowed, particularly if it's, as you made the point, if it's within the employee's job description. For example, if you're administering a Facebook page or a LinkedIn company page, I believe the employee should have access to the social media tools and not be expected to do job-related functions from either their own devices and or from home. And I specifically point that out because I fall into that category. I have started using social media in my job, and I didn't have access to Facebook. So it's sort of like, why am I doing this? It's kind of ridiculous. So that has been addressed. I am now allowed to use social media at work, but Facebook at work, but there's still some glitches. I'm not able to upload video, so I'm still doing some of that function that's job related on my own time. According to Jean Meister from a Forbes contributor, she wrote an article recently saying that employees can be more productive by using the social networks. A big data firm called Evolve did a study and found that employees are better at handling customer interactions that stem from the fact that they're inherently more social people. Evolve suggested in its conclusions that in a sales capacity, hourly workers in a call center from a sample size of over 39,000 employees who used 1 to 4 social networking sites on a weekly basis stayed at their jobs longer than their peers. That skill set of interaction contributed to them being better in a sales capacity than their colleagues who didn't use social media. Unless you're like a social media manager, then you would probably be on social media the whole day, because that's your job. If it's just a part of your job, like I use social media, I use Pinterest, I use Twitter, I collect quotes from the internet and put them to graphics. So without the use of the web and social media, Pinterest is a great source, and so is Twitter, because there's collections quotes that make my doing that task easier rather than going through, a book of Benjamin Franklin quotes. Or imagine how time consuming that would be. Where would I get all that information from if I have to come up with, 25 different quotes? I have to be able to, vet the quote. So in fact, the social media helps me do my job better and, and quicker. But I like the point that you made about employees may not even be using the company equipment because they are on their own devices. And I take that very same point and say, if a company doesn't allow them to use social media, they're going to use it anyway on these devices. So why not, incorporate a policy allowing for, especially if it's job related, allowing for that access, but perhaps limiting it in scope if you're not in a high level social media management position. So that's my argument for pro social media.
Well, I think you bring up some good points, and I think maybe the balance that we could find is people who don't need social media to complete their job should be monitored a little bit more closely, such as I don't want my accountant, twittering while he should be doing my finances. I think those type of job fields need to limit access to social media. I think it's harder to limit access to jobs such as ours, again, because I work at a newspaper, and I'm not the multimedia editor. I'm just an editor. We have a multimedia editor who does pictures and videos, and he uses Hootsuite to send out multiple tweets a day, and he helps clean up the website. My job, is to just sit on Facebook, or not sit on Facebook all day, but I have it open for a good part of the evening, and I just watch the news feed to see what the local news stations have. Is there a breaking news story that they picked up before we did? Because it's hard to compete with news stations and radio stations and other. Richmond Times Dispatch is the largest newspaper in this area, and they're daily. And Petersburg, the Progress Index is only 20 miles south of Richmond, but we still have to compete with the Richmond Times Dispatch.
Right. No, I think that's a great point. That in a news environment, the feeds actually are more to the moment than even the New York Times. The Twitter feed beats the New York Times. So to some extent, in a professional capacity, you can't shut it out. You have to have access to do your job. But you're right. Depending on the capacity of what you're doing, would then speak to the point of how much time you're spending on that site.
I think that companies need to start looking at social media policies and developing policies, again, specifically for people that maybe are not in the media field. I think is where the distraction lies. I'm talking accounting, politics, I guess international relations, even administration work. I think that those types of fields don't really need social media during work hours to continue thriving. So maybe those types of companies could look at developing social media and maybe help increase productivity and encourage that people use social media on, breaks, or, like I have to tell my supervisor if she's with me, hey, I'm going to be taking my dinner. So she doesn't think I'm wasting, work hours doing whatever. If she knows I'm on my dinner break and she sees me doing schoolwork, she's not going to say anything to me.
Yeah.
So I think companies need to make a better effort to find that balance, because it is unfortunate. A lot of people do get fired over using social media at work. And of course it is their own stupidity. I like the people who don't, I read a story earlier that someone took a picture of themselves at work, and it happened to be that a bulletin behind them
Oh,
had classified work information, and he posted it to Instagram during work hours at a work setting, and he ended up getting fired because classified information had been leaked. So
yeah.
I
Wow.
think employees need to be educated as well. I
Yeah.
think there is no line, it's very blurred. I
Yeah.
think employers need to sit employees down and tell them their expectations and, this is what I want out of you, this is what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. And I just think that that is a really big issue, and I still support uh, not using social media during work hours for people, at least, who are not in the field of media.
Oh, that I think you make. I think that's a good analysis and conclusion because especially in that example, that people I think to some extent aren't thinking. They think anything is up for Facebook posting and they're not paying attention. It's sort of dumbing them down to like anything is grist for the social media mill, and it's really not the case. I mean, you really have to be up on what agreements you sign on to when you take a job, and maybe you don't remember when they hired you. You may have signed like a contract with them, and so people do need to really be reminded of what's acceptable within the workplace. So I agree that there's got to be a meeting of the minds between management and employees, and perhaps it could work out. But people need to be reminded, and it needs to be revisited as things evolve, because what may work one year as the technologies evolve. Like, look what happened with the Boston bombings. I mean, that whole case like actually took place. So much was happening, and Twitter was so much of a part of what was happening that you if you were a part of the police department. There's a police department in Connecticut that was actually just banned from using social media. Now, what happens if something happens in Connecticut? I mean, how do if the social media helps you do your job? I mean, I would find that would be a conflict then. So I think there needs to be, at least a clause that, let's keep the communication open, because sometimes it could work to the benefit and sometimes it could be detrimental. All right, thank you. I'm gonna
Thanks,